Thank you very much, and welcome to what is normally, I hope, a bit of fun as well as being of some interest, I hope, to you all. We have got a great selection of panelists, so I'm going to introduce them to you. If I start to my left with Peter Reid, who some of you will know has done this before, being up on the panel, in fact more than once, I think.
It is, yeah.
So he's the one who should know what he's doing. Whether that's going to be the case or not, we'll find out. He grew up on a dairy farm, on the family dairy farm in the Blackdown Hills, but left the farm to go into education. And he specialises in apprenticeships and skill development within the agricultural sector. So really very relevant. And he's now lead of agricultural apprenticeships for Skern Training Skills in North Devon. So that's Peter. And then we have Megan Broom, who is the Devon YFC County Agri Chairman. This is the first or one of the big deals that you do as Agri Chairman. I hope, Megan, you'll enjoy that and that you are enjoying it. She has been a member of Honiton YFC for 11 years and works on the family dairy farm in East Devon. And she learned her agriculture at Kingston Moorwood College, worked for Genus for a bit, and went back to the family farm as well. She's pretty passionate about farming opportunities for the next generation. We then come to Liz on my right, who's a first-generation tenant farmer. She and her husband started farming 10 years ago on a Devon County Council tenancy. Traditionally, the county councils have been a source of tenancies for young people coming into agriculture. That's fine, provided the council hasn't sold all the farms. Luckily, Devon hasn't and is still keen on tenants, but that unfortunately isn't the case everywhere. She sits on the NFU National Poultry Board, is tenant representative for the Devon County Farms Estate, and is again passionate about opportunities for new entrants into agriculture. And then last but by no means least is Sam Briant-Evans, who's Director of Agriculture at Clinton Devon Estates. Clinton Devon are sponsors of this debate, so he's under special pressure to perform. He's came to Clinton Devon after working with Velcourt. He's been appointed as Director of Agriculture. He's a graduate of the Royal Agricultural College, and we look forward to hearing what he's got to say as well. And what I've asked the various panelists to do is to open up with a 5-minute introductory comment about the title. And the title of the debate, just to remind you, is To Farm or Not to Farm? Are there enough opportunities for the next generation in agriculture? And I suspect that some of you will say, well, is there any discussion about that? But I think there is. I think to farm or not to farm, interesting question. Some people might feel that farming doesn't have a future, or actually farming doesn't have a future while diversified farming might. So there are aspects to that, and there are aspects to whether there are enough opportunities or not. And some of you will think there are some opportunities, some of you think there won't be. So there may be an opportunity for different views. I hope there will be. And if you're sitting in the audience and you want to ask a question with a contrary view, that's always very welcome, because it actually gives us a bit more of a debate that way. So I'm going to start, because she asked if she could go first, with Megan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, ladies, gentlemen, and fellow young farmers, and thank you all for coming this morning to our Agri Debate. I'm Megan Broom, and I am the Agri Chairman this year, so I am fortunate enough to be on the panel. Me and my brothers, we work at our family dairy farm in East Devon. We lost our dad 5 years ago and have therefore jumped into the deep end on running the business, managing staff, and getting through the day-to-day work of running a dairy farm. We milk 350 cows and have had a lot of challenges over the last 5 years and know some of the barriers that we're going to meet going forward. As we're so keen, all three of us won't all be able to be on the farm forever. My two brothers hopefully will have families and want to separate, so we'll be looking into hopefully purchasing or running for a tenancy of another farm for him to be secure in the future. This has its problems. Renting land in our area, we're facing the challenges of development, the digester, solar panels, and wilding. I think the digester is a huge problem for us personally. They're able to pay rent prices that we just cannot afford to go and put rents at their prices because they are managing to get more money out of the land than we would. This is a serious problem going forward and really does concern me. We then look at the farmsteads surrounding us, and a lot of retired farmers, when they look to sell their farms, they want to make the most money they can. So they're going to split the farm into lots because that is their pension pot, and they really do want to maximise the profit they're going to get from their farm. So then we see the house gets sold separately, somebody moves into the countryside, and the land gets taken to the nearest farm that will pay the most money. So that is a problem, a huge problem for us going forward. Also, to buy a farm, we're talking about borrowing money, huge money, and with interest rates the way they are, asking for money, will they even give us money to be able to go forward and buy a farm? Another problem that faces my brothers and myself. We then look at tenancies, and me and my other half have already looked at a tenancy, and it's such a competitive market. We've got so many individuals that are very worthy of getting a farm, but there's so many of us, and there's so little opportunities to go for tenant farms because they're disappearing. We look at an estate nearby, a National Trust farm. One farm's got swallowed up, and the other farms around have taken it on, and another farm has gone for wilding. I think environmentally, wilding on grade 1 arable land is a problem. I mean, we're here as farmers to produce food, and we're always going to be needed, but we need the productive land. We need available land to move forward, and I think that is a very scary thought that grade 1 arable land is getting taken for solar panels, wilding, and digesters, and us as farmers, we need to feed our country. So there is a place for us, but I think the big barrier is land availability. So that's a bit from me at the moment, but yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Very well put, if I may say so. Liz, can I turn to you now, please?
Yep, certainly. So, to farm or not to farm, are there enough opportunities for the next generation? I'm coming from it from a slightly different side from Megan, although we all face the same challenges. We were not from farming backgrounds, so we didn't have the capital or the land at home to be able to farm where we were. We had to go out to the open market and find a tenancy. The route we decided to go down, we looked at all manner of tenancies, but we ended up down a county council tenancy route, which county council tenancies offer amazing opportunities for new and young entrants coming into the system. The problem we've got with county council farms is that councils are disposing of them to fill gaps in budgets. And in the last 40 years, half of the council farm area has been lost by way of sales, which essentially is giving you half of the volume of opportunities to the new entrants coming in, which is fairly terrifying statistic. There are still opportunities out there with council farms, with private tenancies, with grazing agreements. You know, you've got to maybe think outside the box sometimes when you're looking for these opportunities to be able to farm. We had to move 2 hours down the road. You're unlikely to find them in your own area. Our average age of a UK farmer is 59. We have to be finding opportunities for the next generation to be able to continue farming and to be able to be innovative in farming, to be able to change the way we do things and adapt to consumer demands and government demands. The length of tenancy is both a problem and a benefit. As a tenant, I want a long tenancy. I want to be able to have the ability to develop my business, to grow capital, to have a really good business at the end of my tenancy, to be able to then move on, whether that be onto a private tenancy or in an ideal situation to be able to buy my own land. but I want a long-term tenancy, which means I'm blocking up one of those new entrant opportunities. So we've got a bit of a pyramid. We need to have an awful lot of starter farms to get people into farming, but then you've also got to have a lot of progression farms or willing private tenants that are willing to take those farmers on to free up that system to allow it to move. So are there enough opportunities? In that respect, possibly not. We need to be encouraging those people onto those farms, but we also need to be encouraging those people to move through that system to free it up for the next tenants. The price of rents is a big problem. Again, the problems with land rental prices and anaerobic digesters pushing up the prices for the maize, that's a problem. The way policy's going and us being incentivized to make way for nature, that's brilliant, but we need that land to farm as well to be able to produce our profitable business, to be able to grow our capital, to be able to move on. Are we being a bit fixed on are there enough opportunities for the next generation in agriculture? Looking at purely the farming side, we have a huge availability in the labour market in agriculture in varying different sectors, whether that be on farm working or whether that be in its associated sectors. So there are huge opportunities in agriculture, but I guess it depends where you're looking at your opportunity. Should you be farming? Do you want to farm? Would you be better working on the farm in an associated industry? So I think it's a fascinating debate, and I'm looking forward to getting stuck in.
Thank you very much. Sam, would you like to give us your views?
Thank you, David. So to farm or not to farm? Well, I chose to farm. I don't come from a farming background. My family don't farm, but I was lucky enough to grow up in rural mid-Devon. And ever since I can remember, farming is what I've always wanted to do. At the time, I was fed up and felt disadvantaged that I didn't have a family farm. Most of my mates had family farms, and I was quite jealous. But actually, looking back, it meant I had no pressure and I could go and forge a career in the way I wanted to. I wasn't forced to go down any particular route. But I started out working for neighbours on neighbours' dairy farms. I built up a bit of a reputation from there, then went away to Ag College, and then became a trainee farm manager for Velcourt, worked in Gloucestershire, and then back in North Devon, and now I am where I am in East Devon. So I guess you don't have to come from a farming background to be successful in agriculture, but it takes a lot of determination and hard work. But if you're passionate about it, and I believe it is a sort of a metaphor for life, if you're passionate about it enough, you can do it. Just to pick up on a few of the points that have been made earlier, there are lots of opportunities for people to get into agriculture, whether you're from a farming background or not, and to have a successful farming career. But you've got to go and look for it. They don't fall into your lap. County council farms are a great opportunity to get your foot on the ladder. And in Devon, we're lucky enough to have a lot more county council farms than a lot of other counties. But they are only limited tenancies, normally up to about 7 years, 10 years in Liz's case. And therefore, Liz is quite right in that we need that progression, and something that we work quite hard on as an estate, and not trying to blow our own trumpet, but we offer, we've let 2 farms in the last 5 years on 15-year farm business tenancies, and specifically targeting that next step for people who have already got an established business that they want to expand. And I think other estates and other large landowners need to be encouraged to do that. But yeah, as with the other candidates, looking forward to the debate.
Thank you very much. And Peter, please.
Goodness, yeah. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I don't know how to follow the last 3, but yeah. So just to, in David's introduction, mention that I come from a dairy farm on the Blackdown Hills, quite rightly. The youngest of 4 children. So it got a bit tricky in 2014. So yes, decided to leave. So I just think also looking at the word farm, to farm or not to farm, is actually what do we mean by farm? Are we meaning actually having a farm of our own, whether that's a council farm or a tenant farm or a family farm, and actually putting our feet and the forks into the soil and driving tractors, or is it the whole wider spectrum of agriculture as a whole? through the apprenticeships over the years that I've been doing and the training, the succession side of things, I've been to numerous, you could nearly say hundreds of farms across Devon and Cornwall and other parts of the country. And I still go back to the whole succession and families communicating to each other about what opportunities are there on the farm. If you do have a family farm or any business, you've got a huge range of assets there, really. And I'm not just meaning financially if you put it on the market. I'm meaning ways that you can make money off your farm. There's so many different ways. And I think through the training side of things with apprenticeships, we look at every opportunity. Are you rinsing every opportunity from that business to be able to make a viable business and a diverse business that you've got? Now, when I say diverse, I'm not meaning holiday lets or solar panels. I'm meaning biodiversity, public coming onto your farm, which I know might be a swear word, but public footpaths. You know, we've got one field on our farm that doesn't have a footpath. So we embrace the public because they're there. So we try and communicate and educate the public while they're on our farm without them realising. So I think there's lots of opportunities that we can work together for the future of farming. So I think bringing into the education side of it, wearing my education hat, is we're very much at SCS about providing the opportunities to see how to make contact with the public, your suppliers, your buying chain, and building relationships. Thinking, you know, recently with some students, we had the conversation about building a relationship with your abattoir, for example, but also with your local hotel down the road. They were doing over 100 roast dinners a day. So I asked them, just go and ask the pub or the hotel, where do they get their beef from? Where are they getting their pork from? And 2 months later, they were supplying that hotel with their own beef from the farm. So it's looking at those opportunities and rinsing everything that you've got on your farm. So through the training and education, I think that's a way that we can bring a future into our industry, is by communicating and working locally with what's around us. So that's just a few points that I'll bring into the point. But I think we've got a really good panel here this morning that's going to bring some quite diverse ranges into it. And I think, if you don't mind, David, I'm just going to chuck a question back to Megan. I know you're thinking, oh no, not me, but you're really capable. So I was just thinking, Megan, with your business and looking at like your milk then, because you've mentioned you're a dairy, how do you sort of build that relationship? Are you actually going out to your milk buyer and looking at those opportunities, or are you just accepting what they're saying? Do you think that's a way that we could help the opportunity to bring this and make a future stronger as such for us? Sorry, but I was just thinking that.
Shall I answer?
Well, yeah. Shall we answer? What do you reckon?
Yeah. So I think for us, we've got more opportunity to promote ourselves as a farm. I think I speak for me and my brothers. We're a bit scared of sort of going and putting ourselves out there for the public, just for the bad PR that farmers and especially dairy farmers have had. But I think now we need to promote ourselves as much as we can and speak to our milk supplier, Pattermore's, and work with them to get our products out there, push what we do as farmers, and just show the link. It's all about getting those supermarkets realising, the consumer realising where their product comes from and what goes into our milk. And yeah, I think we could do more. Yeah, so thank you.
I'd like to open it up and see if anybody's got some questions from the floor, which we could test our panelists with. So anybody like to start with anything? Yes, question here. Is there a roving mic or? Yep.
It's a general question. Because the farmers, Megan did say, retiring, etc., and now obviously selling off the land, is there any opportunity, because I know that you do this shared farming, are we finding the older generation, or including the youngsters, I mean, hasn't got to be family members for the shared farming at all?
Okay, so interesting question about share farming, and there are, as you say, people retiring who would quite like to be still involved in their farm, maybe acting as a mentor for somebody, particularly if they don't have family, for those farms that don't have family. So opportunities really for going into share farming, and whether any of the panel have any experience of share farming. Anybody that would like to come in on share farming?
Yeah, I can just give some examples for instance, just on the share farming type of thing. And I think that goes back to the communication and working with farmers around you. The days of nobody crossing my farm gate and being quite narrow-minded, to be honest, I think are quite numbered. And working with each other and collaborating is a key as well moving forward. So the whole share farming, a couple of my past level 4 students at Durham Agricultural Business Management have taken up share farming with local farmers, and that is through communication, talking to them. And I think with the latest government push on like the retirement fund that's available, we are seeing, or I've been approached by a couple of farms asking if I've got students that would be interested in doing share farming. So that's, in a way, what that was set up for, I would have thought. So that potentially is bringing a few farms to the market for share farming. But it is a good way. You've just got to, I would say, make sure you've got all your paperwork in place and an agreement that's properly signed. But yeah, it's a huge way there. And a lot of farmers would quite like to see animals on their fields or in their sheds that they're not necessarily having to tend to themselves. So again, absolutely, it's definitely a way forward, but it's that communication of farmers coming forward to the YFC or training institutions to say, we're thinking about doing it. There's an opportunity for somebody to take it on. So
I think one of the challenges is whether there's enough profit to share between two different people in a share farming arrangement. And in my experience, the more profitable ones probably work. But if you have a marginal profit on a farm and then try and split it between two people, that's a bit more challenging. Sam, have you come across any share farming, or are you doing any at Clinton Devon?
I'm not personally, although we do have a couple of, one tenant in particular who offers share farming opportunities to others, and they've been very successful. But they do require planning, and they require, it's very important to have a formal business agreement so that each partner knows exactly where they are from the outset. Otherwise, things can get a bit messy, and edges can be graded. But I think, they can be profitable and they can work. And I think in the right situation, they're a fantastic way of getting into farming and having support, but also independence to farm and manage your, if it's a dairy herd, your dairy herd, in a way that you want to. But I think a very good point was made just now that it's about people putting themselves forward. Farmers who are getting to retirement age and don't have any succession for whatever reason, whether it's they don't have children or the children have left the industry, to put themselves forward and offer these opportunities to young people, because I'm sure there's more than a handful of people in this room who would bite someone's hand off for an opportunity.
Anything you want to say, Liz? No.
No direct experience.
No. Okay. Is there some more questions? A question at the back here, please.
Thank you. Just on the share farming business that I came from before, we found it really, really important allowing young people to come into the business that had a clear point when they started. They weren't going to stay forever. They wanted to move on to their own holdings, was allowing them to build capital assets while they were in the building and while they were in the business. So even with certain individuals paying annual bonuses, etc., in livestock, in the assets, so they could actually start to build a pool of assets in business. So when they did move on, they'd actually already got that bank in the background, and if people are willing to allow them to do that, it's an amazing start for young people.
Thank you very much. And I understand that is what underpins the share farming in New Zealand, for example, where not only are people happy to share the herd, as it were, but also the land. And that, of course, is something which I've not come across people being very keen to do in this country. So thanks for that comment. Any other questions on a different subject? Is there anyone would like to raise? Yes, over at the back, please.
Thank you. So you've all talked about how the sort of limitations in farming is availability of land and capital and things. And I just wondered, whether generally we look at farming too narrowly, and I was just wondering what is the definition of farming, because you see a lot more at the moment vertical farms that require very little sort of space to create a business, and I just wondered what the panel's thoughts were on the definition of farming, and is it really a case of owning land and having some cows and milking them, or producing beef and things like that?
Okay, Liz, would you like to start on this one?
Yeah, so I actually almost think it's entirely the opposite of owning land and being able to farm on that land. And I think some of our best farmers are actually the ones that have been able to think outside the box and find those little niche opportunities that probably you didn't realise exist. What am I thinking of? So, yeah, the vertical farming, there's been some brilliant ones of those. I spoke to a chap the other day who had a brilliant business using marginal grazing land, and he was actually being paid to graze his cattle on some of this marginal grazing land. He was having to drive around the county to do it, but he'd still managed to make a business out of having absolutely no land and very little capital. You've got all the other things out there as well for your smaller scale sort of horticultural things. You've got the ecological land cooperatives where you can buy your little plot of land and have your house on it. I think the key to farming, and certainly being a new entrant in farming or finding your spot in farming, is thinking outside the box and finding those little opportunities. And actually, I think those are often the farmers that have some really successful little businesses because they've managed to find those opportunities that probably didn't exist.
Megan, have you got a thought on this?
Yeah, I think I did just write think out of the box, so that Liz has said that. But I think farming, we've always thought of producing food and having produce, and that's always what I would go with farming. But I think now we're looking at our carbon input a lot more. We're maximising, we're trying to get as much as we can from as little space. So vertical farming, it's all going to come into it because we are trying to get a lot more from less. So it's about using your assets, maximising your assets, and on a farm looking at empty sheds, just anything to maximise your inputs from what you've got and from less.
Yeah, okay. Peter?
Definitely. Yeah, thank you, David. I think also on that you mentioned about looking outside the box, absolutely. And just to pick up on your point as well, David, about New Zealand, I was fortunate enough, and I've just come back from 6 months doing a season out there of milking and calving and all the rest of it. And just on the breeding side of that, you know, yes, they have their herds, but on the farm I was on, they have share cows. So they had some really top pedigree cows, and there was 3 people that owned that cow, so they all took a share. So just going back to your point there, and yours, David, about building a sort of collateral and assets through share farming and just working with others, going back to my main point of communicating and working with other people outside of your own farm, helps you to build your own assets. But yeah, farming, and I think it goes back as well, you know, you're quite right. I'm an advocate that farming is not just about, it is producing food 100%, but we've got lots of challenges that the government, I wouldn't say they're hurdles, they're challenges for us to be able to adapt and to overcome. So looking at the carbon neutral and the rewilding, all of these types of opportunities that are there, 100%. With the opportunities there, just like I took some students up to a farm and they were doing parts of it rewilding. It was quite a big estate. So the question was, how are you rewilding on when you're producing so many acres of corn? And he said there's areas that aren't productive on the farm, so we're rewilding it. So how do you know they're not reproductive? Well, we do some samples, we measure how much comes off that area, we look at the biodiversity of that particular area. It wasn't paying the bills, so we're rewilding it. So when we're thinking of these opportunities, it's not your whole farm's going to be taken over by it. It's really looking at what you've got and going back to being able to rinse all your assets of parts of your farms to be able to overcome and take all the opportunities that are there. Because there's a lot of payment out there, to be fair, that the government are really encouraging. So the opportunities are there, and it's perhaps, so I'm going off on a waffle, tell me to be quiet, but just on the training side of things, that's what we train our apprentices. That's what's in the apprenticeship programs, is being able to look at all these opportunities and how to fill out the forms and how to do the grants and how to do X, Y, and Z to make yourself be able to take up all the opportunities that are there. So I'm really excited for the opportunity. We're going for a huge change in the industry. I think a lot of the farmers might be the ones that aren't realising it, but it's great for the younger people coming in and the next generation. I think it's really exciting to be able to look outside of that box and do more than just driving a tractor and feeding a cow. It's huge. Fundamentally, that is very important, though.
Sam, anything?
Yeah, just to add, I think we shouldn't forget that you don't have to have a huge amount of capital behind you to go farming, and farming is not just about being a farmer, it's about a career in agriculture. And you know, I've gone through the farm management pathway because I didn't have the resources behind me to do anything on my own. But actually, you know, I get a huge amount of satisfaction from managing someone else's asset, working with someone else's capital. I don't have the risk. I get a salary, but I still would consider myself a farmer.
And do you think that more people should consider, you know, a medium-term route into agriculture rather than expecting too much on day one? Are some people thinking at the age of 18 that they should suddenly be running their own farm? Is that right? Is that wrong? Is that good? Is that bad?
I think it's good to have that ambition and that drive, but I think you shouldn't, there's no point in running before you can walk. And like in any career, experience is key. So it's baby steps, and it's taking the right opportunities when they come. It's about communication, talking to people, getting yourself out there, getting yourself known, and earning a good reputation. And then, you know, if you're lucky, people start looking for you, you know.
Okay. Question right at the back, please. Oh, it was going to be behind, but anyway.
Well, mine is on this point, if that's okay.
Yeah, do it, fine.
We've talked a lot about opportunities there, and obviously we are aware there are opportunities that are coming our way given the changes that we've had recently. But my question is actually to Megan. Given the circumstances that you have faced, how easily do you find those opportunities? Do you find that they are accessible to you, or have you had some advice, or are you just trying to find your own way in this?
So we do have a lot of advice, us personally, and we ask people for their expertise all the time, and that's how we're getting through these difficult years that we've been through. And I think it's, if you don't know something, ask, because you're not going to know, and it's important we know everything and what opportunities are available. There's a lot of grants and funding that if we hadn't have got a consultant in, we may have not known that was available and not had that grant money. So I think personally, and because of the situation we're in, we've had to ask, and I don't think you should be scared about asking professionals and getting professional support, because really you might pay a little fee, but what you could get out of that is so much more. So that's a personal, how I personally feel. Just ask for help and don't be scared to ask.
Okay. Yes, Alex.
Thank you very much. I wanted to underline Sam's point about management. It's been really interesting that on some of our NFU sector boards in the region, we've now got sort of an even split of farm managers, owner-occupiers and tenants, which is absolutely brilliant. But my question really is about, you know, we've heard a lot about capital and finance and starting up. How helpful are the banks or other lenders when you come to them with just a good idea and not necessarily a lot more backing behind you than that?
Good question. I don't know, Liz, why don't you have a go at that?
Yeah, how helpful are they? That's a really tricky one, because I think you asked if you come to them with just a really good idea, generally not very helpful at all, I think, from our side. I think you have to have a lot of background. So you've got to have your budgets, your cash flows, your forecast for your business. You've got to know where that business is going, and you've got to be able to justify how you think it's going to get there. Once you've done that, actually, I think if the banks believe in you, quite often you can then access the finance. But I think it's not easy, and there's an awful, speaking in a personal sense, we borrowed an awful lot of money from the bank to get our business to where it was, and there was an awful lot of work with the bank. Cash flows and budgets I've done in my sleep for the last 10 years, and I think that's what we've had to do. We've found some banks far more supportive than others, so I think it's we sometimes are really loyal to a bank when probably we shouldn't be loyal to a bank, and we should probably look around and shop around and see what else is out there. And if you do that, you can then find that bank that agrees with your idea, likes you as the driver of that business, and away you go and you don't look back. So I think sometimes it's horses for courses. You've got to find the right person to drive on with you.
Very diplomatic. Is your bank manager in the room?
No, I don't think he is.
Any other comments on banks?
Yeah, I would just say, just on the level 4 assistant farm manager apprenticeship that you can do, which is sort of for their succession planning or looking to take on a tenant farm, and Liz has been very kind to host us to do a full application. So for that farm, you do a full application as part of the apprenticeship, and then you do an application to finance that from the bank. So we've been working with Lloyds Bank or myself for the last 5 or 6 years on that side of things, and the students are always asking how easy it is to borrow money against taking on a tenancy, and they put all their plans together. And I think in the interview process, the banks have been very accommodating, but when you've been talking to them, the latest one that we done was 2021. I know it was in the middle of COVID, etc., but they were still saying to the students that if you've got a good business plan and your cash flow's looking good, whatever good is supposed to be, but in the plus, they would still be lending you a pound. So you put £1 in and they would match £1. So the banks there were being very supportive to the students that were doing this application for a council farm. So the opportunities that the banks were giving students of ours, that a couple have taken on farms through them, have been positive. So I thought I'd just bring that in.
Can I just widen that? Because that point about banks, I wondered whether any of you have experience of people that you deal with expecting higher environmental standards as a condition of whether it's a bank or whether it's a processor or somebody you deal with, because I'm seeing quite a lot of people starting to feel the pressure from their own shareholders of being, whether it's ethical or whatever, that's actually driving higher environmental standards which need to be demonstrated by people actually supplying them. Have any of you come across any of that in any of your businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing it in the dairy trade, in the dairy sector, and some processes are more proactive on that than others. But Arla being a key example. But once one sets a bar, others will follow. So it's a trend that we're gonna see. But we also challenge ourselves, and I think as an estate, we challenge ourselves to farm in an environmentally sensitive and sustainable manner. So actually, it all ties together, but it does come at a cost.
Okay, Liz.
Definitely, we've seen it coming through in the egg sector, that supermarkets are very driven to ensure that everything it's environmental. It's probably not as far down as the dairy sector yet down that line, but I think it's definitely coming. Crossing that with Alex's point about banks and funding and finance, and going back to cash flows and budgets. And I think, especially as a new entrant, you have to know what your business is doing financially, and we run our budgets and cash flows regularly and update them regularly. And I think as part of that, you can also look at parts of your farm and see the least productive areas, and that's the area where you go, okay, so it's not a particularly productive agricultural area there, so what other funding can I get? Can I unlock some of the grant funding or the stewardship funding or some catchment sensitive funding? Is there something else? So I think sometimes by looking at your whole farm as a business, you can identify areas that you can bring in those nature benefits. And actually, I think we should view that as a crop sometimes rather than just as that scabby bit of area over there. So I think it can all interlink nicely.
Sure. Anything on this side, either of you?
I'm slightly going off, but I say the Environment Agency puts a lot of pressure, especially on dairy farmers. We've got to be compliant, and the slurry storage and silage pits are a huge thing they're really focusing on. I mean, we're on the River Axe, and we've got so much pressure by the EA, and it's a big expense to make them compliant. So I think that's something a bit away from the buyer, but that is a pressure on farmers.
Okay, thank you. Peter?
Yeah, I just think on that, again, it's being able to educate the A, the public, but B, like the farmers and the ones that are managing the land or having those opportunities of exactly like what Liz said, is knowing your cost of production, knowing where your farm's going and how to work with the policies. I mentioned about the carbon neutral. Again, it's being able to understand what your farm's producing and how you can put a plan together. And quite often it's easy for me to say because I'm not doing it every day, but it's quite often it's little things that you can make a small little change and it actually has quite a huge impact on your carbon footprint. So it's being able to educate the ones doing that, whether that's the farmers or whoever, to be able to do your audits, etc., etc. But also going back to what Megan said about don't being afraid to ask for help, I think is a really important thing as well, is being able to ask other people for help. Now, we're not very good, are we, at doing that as a farming industry? Your best answers are from your farmers next door that are doing the same thing. At Skittles, we all have a good conversation about those type of things over a pint, but I would say that's really important, is working together, and I think that's what I was saying about the farmers. We've got to work together to be able to answer each other's problems because we're all going through the same thing. So I've gone on another tangent there, but absolutely.
Do you get help with your Skittles?
Well, the longer the pints go on, yes.
Thank you. A question here, Michael?
Thank you, David. For the young farmers, we have a particular challenge in the industry of catering where we're trying to get young people into businesses and starting up businesses is very difficult. So how do you get access to land and farmland for young farmers to come through and start the process of becoming independent?
So, panel, either from your own perspective or from what you know of the industry, those people that are getting access to land, how are they doing it? What is it that they're doing that is different from the people that are failing to get it? And I can give an example where we at home had a small start-up tenancy, which we still do, and the first people moved on and we've got another. And we had 50 applicants. We did it with Farmers Weekly in partnership. We had 50 applicants. What's really interesting is I met them all and we showed them around the farm. Most of them were dreamers, if I'm completely honest. They wanted the farm, but they did not have a business plan that worked. They hadn't thought through some of the implications, and it was actually much easier to get it down to 4 people to interview than I thought it would be. Tell me what makes it possible for people to get the land that do get it. Peter, do you want to start on that?
Yeah, I can. I think it's having the conversations with landowners around you and seeing, because quite often there is land. I think I was at West Point for the rootstock, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And there was a speaker there, and they rented ground and they paid very little for it, and it was waste ground basically. That along the side, not actually along the side of the railways, but along the sides of areas where normally on the trains you see it's just sort of scrub ground, those types of areas, and they were farming those areas with its livestock, paying very little money, putting livestock in there and grazing, and supplying local hotels and that with their beef and lamb. So that to me was thinking outside the box. So it's not necessarily those opportunities are there. I think again it's going back to what I've been saying of having those discussions with local farmers. Is there some land? This is what we're looking to do. This is my business plan. This is my ideas. This is what potentially I can pay you, etc., etc. And moving forward. So it's being able to understand how to do the business plans and to communicate.
And also getting out there and meeting people.
Absolutely.
So Megan, you're looking at this, I think, from your own personal point of view, trying to find somewhere where you might get a tenancy or get hold of land. How are you planning on going about that?
I think the most important thing is going into and applying for farms is that you know your plan and you believe in yourself. You can sit there and know your figures and know they're going to match up. I think several people get a professional to do their business plans and write their applications, and they get to the next stage and they don't know what they're actually doing because somebody else has done it for them. So I think you've got to know your plan, know your budgets, and make sense of it and know that it will work, because fundamentally, if you get that farm, you've got to make it work to pay your rent. So you need to know your figures.
Michael, can I ask do people, is there a microphone still available here? Do do people come to you and ask you if you would be interested in using their products in your business?
Yeah, and we always try and we have the argument where people say we've got this wonderful, say, pork, beef, whatever it might be, and it is amazing. And then you say, well, how many can you give me? And they say, we can give you 4 a week, and we say, great, we need 15. So what we then do is put them into the supply chain, people like at Darts Farm, who can process that through for us, and then make it sensible. But we're always trying to work with the community of farming to bring their product. People want to know about provenance, and here in the southwest, in particular Devon, part of the DNA of restaurants is more and more about the provenance of where the food is from. And I've championed for a very long time the larder of Devon, and we're very, very lucky that we've just got such a wonderful array of great produce being farmed here that can come straight onto the plate. And that's part of the reason why people want to come to Devon and eat and stay in our restaurants, and that's part of the reason why I've gained the reputation I have as a chef.
Thank you. And can I also ask you one other question? Sorry, I'm not just taking advantage of Michael being here, but those people going into catering restaurants or on their own, which obviously you've done, but you've come up through those ranks. Do you think there are parallels in all small startup businesses that can learn from each other as to the pitfalls and the benefits of how to do it?
It's very similar. We have to work as a community, and we do find comfort in speaking with each other and benchmarking and understanding each other's problems. And also, it's the opportunities. Obviously, where there's a down, there's also going to be an up. There's vacant space that comes in the high street or generally where people fail because they haven't done their business plans. Getting access to finance is difficult with the banks, of course, and also because you can't necessarily underwrite that investment with any capital sort of gain. So if you're leasing or renting space, that's more problematic. Getting some business angels and business partners is tricky. The returns are sometimes long term and not a quick turnaround. So it's finding the sort of the willing partners that want to be there with the business plan, as you've already said, but also the passion and the energy behind your business is always the difference. People will make a business successful because they work hard in the business and work hard at the business, so that's important.
Sure, and with the chefs who make it, they've always had the passion, haven't they? And so. Thank you very much. And I think that's quite reassuring to know that farming isn't alone in some of these difficult decisions that they've got to make. Any other questions from the floor? One over here, please. Steve. The microphone's coming the long way round. Yeah.
Thank you, David. Just an interesting thought, really, from a farming community point of view. We often get around the table with families that are looking to the succession and what the future is, and we've got it. When you think of what is a standard farm, there is no such thing as a standard farm because there's so many variations. I do believe we've got a lot of farmers that are farming with a weary mindset because they don't know any sure direction of travel, and I think there is opportunity. I think it would possibly need a change in taxation rules to allow that to happen over longer tenancy periods, because there can be disadvantages on letting out properties over a long period of time. Probably a question to the panel is, how do you stop yourself getting weary? Because we're seeing people getting weary at a younger age, and I think it's important to look at what measures they put in place for the future businesses. We have a job to know what the milk price is going to be in 6 months' time, what the lamb price is going to be in 6 months' time. We always try and encourage people to look longer term, and maybe what happens in 10 years' time is where we need to have a goal. And the realisation that there can be many challenges along the way over that time, but if we know what we're aiming for, we can sometimes come through some of the troughs of challenge. But really, it's a question about how we stop becoming weary.
Thank you. And farming has always had to deal with lots of unknowns, whether it's the weather, whether it's the market price, all the rest of it. But there do seem to be more unknowns at the moment than there have been, and that tends to make people quite weary. Sam, I'm going to start with you because it seems an appropriate one for you. What are your tips for not getting weary?
It's difficult. It's very easy to get weary. I think from a tenant farmer's perspective, there's probably an onus on landlords to offer some support and guidance in terms of next steps. Market volatility we've seen in recent months has been extreme, to say the least. But it's not just about thinking outside the box in terms of diversification, but it's also grabbing the other opportunities that are there and just milking 250 cows because that's what you've done all your life and that's what your father did before that, or farming 300 sheep or whatever it might be. It's about picking up on some of these opportunities that Liz talked about. We're being encouraged to farm more environmentally friendly these days, and I think rightly so. And you can't ignore that. You've got to look at these other avenues of income to complement your core farming business, and look at what the farm lends itself to. If there's no point in trying to milk cows on a hill farm in the middle of Wales, for example. Don't force an enterprise onto a farm that it doesn't suit. Work with the land base you've got. If it's an arable farm, fine. If that's what that's your core income, and then look at the more marginal parts of the land base to supplement that income. So you're looking at diversification products, environmental stewardship schemes, all of those sort of things are vital to supplement the core farming operation. And I think that's where people need to be open-minded and embrace these options that are being pushed our way, rather than fighting it.
But of course, you have to do all of that and understand all of that in a much wider range of things, perhaps, than once was the case. Understanding the paperwork, the stewardship, the opportunities, and the marketing more of your own produce, plus doing the farming is a bit more, isn't it?
It is a big ask, and I think there is help available. There are various organisations that can offer support, and I think there might be a cost associated with it, but it's money well spent.
Yeah. Do you ever get weary?
Yes, very. And I wanted to sort of pull in both the last 2 points, actually. And I found from our personal journey, definitely. So we took on a county council farm, and I joked that we turned up with a huge amount of enthusiasm, a wheelbarrow and a massive bank loan. And sort of the first 6 months, the enthusiasm was there and it was brilliant. The next 6 months, the money ran out and the enthusiasm ran out, and you sort of sit there and go, oh, Jesus, I've got to make this work. And I think from our side, I went into farming because I want to be excited by it. I love farming, I love what we do, but I think at the end of the day, it's like any other job, and sometimes jobs get a bit monotonous and a little bit boring, and in the deep, dark winter, when you're sat there togging up again to go out in the rain to do a job that you really don't want to do, it's hard, and it's really, really hard when going to sort of a fairness in supply chain piece, when you're producing this amazing product. It's massively nutritious. It's really, really well produced from an animal welfare point of view and from everything else. I'm proud of what we're producing. And you're sat there and you're not making any money, and you think, well, actually, that is a bit rubbish. That's when you get weary and you do just wonder why on earth you bother. But I sometimes think we have to view it as a bit of a challenge, and I guess this comes down to you as the farmer. And just because you've always done something in a certain way doesn't actually mean that you have to continue doing it in a certain way. And I think when we get weary, and my husband and I are quite good at doing this, and you sit down and you go, right, what aren't we enjoying? What isn't making money? How can we look at this to change it? And sort of Michael's point earlier on, and that sort of resonated, because what we did was we shortened our supply chain, and we went, well, hang on, we're selling it here, they're selling it there. There's a lot of money here. This supermarket's announcing record profits, and I'm struggling to pay my rent, and that doesn't actually work out. So from us, we kept the core farming business, which was the bit that sort of paid our rent and meant that we were still farming, but we also diversified, and for us that was diversifying into niche egg production. And we supplied some of that direct and some of it to supermarkets, and actually we made more profit. And you think, well, hang on a second, I'm slaving away over here and not actually earning any money, but by changing my business model and doing something a little bit different, we're earning a little bit more money. So I'm getting less weary because I can take a bit of time off, or we can do things with the kids. So farming is really, really hard mentally, and I actually think it's probably one of the hardest things to do from a mental perspective. Cash flow and weather and you name it, it's all out of your control half the time. So I think it's down to us as farmers to get off farm, to see the bigger picture, and actually what's the phrase? You're so busy working in your business, you're not working on your business. And I think sometimes we have to pull ourselves out and look at what we're doing to be able to actually go, well, yeah, why am I doing that again? Change what you're doing and try and find a bit of a quality of life. But I think that's a constantly changing thing. You have to constantly do that. You have to constantly review. And actually, you shouldn't be slaving away for 20 hours a day to earn a living. We should be changing our business or battering the supermarkets over the head to ensure that actually we are profitable and we are still getting time off and not getting weary.
Thank you, Liz. I've got a bit of advice on selling eggs. I got a very good price for a box of 6 once by selling them individually, and whoever bought them could decide who it was in the room that had to catch them. So you may not get too many boxes away that way, but 10 quid a box was our record. What about you? And you're too early a stage to get weary, surely.
Yeah, but I think with farming there are some dark times, and we've had a few things that have gone very wrong. We've lost a lot of cows to TB with the gamma test. And I think you've got to think of the good times. When you've got a bad time, think of the good times. Remember the days where everything goes right, because we're farming, and I know I'm young, but we've had some bad days. But if you go back home and realise that, there is some good times to this. And what we do as a family is we also set ourselves achievable goals, and then we always see progress. Every year we'll sort of write a little list of what we're going to achieve, and just make sure it's achievable sometimes, and then you can see yourself moving forward, and there's progress, and I think that's a really positive way to be. So that's
okay. Well, I think our time is up, actually, on the hour. I don't know if anybody is closing for the home team here. No? Well, in which case, I'd just like to thank our panellists very much. A great insight into farming today. I suspect we could have gone on. This is a debate that wasn't really a debate, but it brought out a whole load of different aspects. And I think it's challenging, but I think it's also exciting at the moment. And there are opportunities there. Not everyone's going to get them, and sometimes you're going to have to persevere. I know that Sir James Dyson did something like 5,000 prototypes before he developed his first cyclone engine that he's done rather well with since. And he always says, if he hadn't done those 5,000 prototypes, he wouldn't be where he is now. So you do have to stick at some of these things, but some wise words from people today. So if you'd like to join me in thanking the panel very much.